Recently, I had the chance to sit down with some of my friends and hear how Jesus changed their lives. I always love hearing someone's testimony, and I thought you might also. The friends I've interviewed are all Jewish people whose lives were radically changed by Jesus. My husband thinks we should call this series Linked to Messiah. On today's episode, you will hear the testimony of my dear friend Garrett Smith. Garrett and I have known one another for decades. Officially, he is Reverend Dr. Garrett Smith, but in his humble nature, he requested to be introduced as Garrett. Garrett is married to his lovely bride, Nikki, and they have 3 children together. You are going to love hearing his story as he goes from San Francisco, California, to the Far East, to Israel, and back to the United States. Wait till you hear how Jesus grabbed his attention. Buckle up and enjoy this incredible story of God's faithfulness. Hey there, my friends. Welcome to the Links to Messiah podcast, where we are passionate about teaching our children all about the connections between the Old and New Testament. I'm your host, Rachel Links Kushner, also known as the Chief Enthusiasm Officer of Links to Messiah. And I am so thrilled to have you join us today. Come along and discover how your family and children can grow in their faith as you discover the beautiful links that God reveals throughout Scripture about the history of His people and His Son, Jesus, our Messiah. I'm very happy to be with my dear, I put old in quotes, my dear old friend, Garrett Smith, who we have known. Garrett, how long have you and I known each other?
I was thinking it's close to 30 years.
I think so.
It's over 25.
It's definitely over 25. Gordon and I have been married for 32 years this month. And I can't remember if I met you before or after I met him. But anyway, it's been decades. We've known each other decades. So you currently serve as a pastor at Newton Covenant Church. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
That's outside of Boston.
Yeah, it's basically Boston. It's right next to Cambridge.
Okay, gotcha. So as you know, we're doing a series on this podcast of sharing testimonies of Jewish believers who have come to know the Lord. And you popped into my head and I said, I have got to talk to Garrett and we need to share your story. So before we get into like all the details of you coming to know the Lord, will you just share a little bit about like kind of your background? I guess when I say your background, what I really mean is like, where are you currently? We know you're outside of Boston, you're pastoring. Tell us a little bit about your family and what life is like for you.
Yeah, so I've pastored a church. I have 3, my wife and I have 3 kids. My wife's actually from Namibia. She's actually also part of a Jewish family that actually immigrated, for the Holocaust, went to Southern Africa, but we got married out in the desert in Namibia.
Oh, you did?
We did.
I didn't know that.
3 places to get married, yeah. But it was actually really beautiful. That's where they film all the desert movies. That's out in the outside of our hometown. But we have 3 kids. My son, Zach's 19, and my daughter's 18, and a second daughter, Ilana, is 14.
Oh, my.
I also work with, I got my doctorate in sort of working with interfaith I call them Jewish intercultural couples, because interfaith's a bit of a misnomer. It's a cultural question, initially. That's sort of also one of my areas of working with. And
just tell us a little bit more about that so people can understand what does that mean exactly?
Well, it can be everything from, for me, working, either helping couples understand the nature of their differences. Because a lot of times they tend to think it's like either or, Jewish or that kind of idea, and realizing it's a series of choices, about how you understand your identity, how you understand your community, what traditions, things want to look in your house, but helping couples navigate that.
Yes.
Identify what some of the real questions are, because some people don't, sometimes they assume, they have all these assumptions about, because your beliefs and who you are very different. For instance, one Christian couple might be, they're thinking about their Christianity as being a belief in God or a belief in Jesus. But from the Jewish person, they're thinking it's about being Jewish, and it's about being part of a community and part of a history. And there's actually not an actual conflict between what you are and what you believe, but they feel like, somehow they're loaded together. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It does make sense. So instead of like parsing it out into two separate categories, you're trying to help families figure out how to mesh together. Is that a fair assumption? Okay.
Exactly. And how to navigate it together and realizing there's actually less conflicts than you might think.
Yes, that's
there's
awesome,
still conflicts,
Garrett.
of course, and you got to make choices. But every marriage is a cultural conflict to some extent.
Wait, you're saying marriages can have conflict? What? I'm not familiar with this.
I've heard that. You've heard counseling is always like how to fight well. All right.
Yes, right. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, wow, that stuff really was important. I get it. Right. Well, that's great. I had forgotten that piece of your life. So that is very helpful and important for families to know, because people need that. A lot of people need that. So let's jump into your personal testimony and how you found Jesus. I know that you were raised in San Francisco in a Jewish home, and I will open the door to you to fill in some more details for us.
Sure. Well, I'm sure somebody who's a classic Jewish community is that I was from an interfaith couple. My mother was actually from a Mormon family in Idaho, and very dating all the way back to Joseph Smith. But she wanted to get away from that life, and and my dad was out of the Holocaust, and as a little boy was kind of taken there, and I think they both missed it and got kind of married late. And it's funny, my dad was willing to marry someone who wasn't Jewish, but he wouldn't raise someone who wasn't. So my mom had to agree to raise us in the synagogue.
Okay.
And so we were always raised Jewish and bar mitzvah and all that kind of stuff. And it was reformed. So they didn't,
Right.
They didn't care that much about mom, dad, that kind of stuff.
When you said that they were reformed, can you explain to people what that means? Because not everyone knows what that means.
Yeah. So one of the different denominations of Judaism, Reform Judaism. And oftentimes in Orthodox Judaism, they talk about matrilineal descent. You're the religion of your mother. Now, biblically, it's actually through the father anyway. But they don't, in a Reform, it's much more sort of like Jewish Unitarianism in some ways.
Okay, that's a perfect explanation. Thank you. That will help people as they listen.
Sure. And so, but my parents, frankly, mom was a pretty tortured person. My dad was real kind, and my mom started drinking from childhood. And so I grew up in a chaotic house, to be frank with you.
Yeah.
I went off to college and had my own kind of substance issues as well. And then when I was about 20, I was just after my 23rd birthday, my mom died.
Oh, wow.
And I'd gotten a job out of San Francisco after college in the stock market, and I thought I was doing real well. Then I went through my mom's death, and I just made you kind of just reevaluate your life and what's going on.
Absolutely. And
so after a couple of years, I decided to quit and kind of like search for some real meaning in life. And so it was kind of strange. I decided to take an immersion Chinese course and move to the Far East.
No way. I didn't know that about you. Really?
Yeah, I was thinking, I think I hated my fears and stuff. And so I wanted to like face all my fears. I thought I'm really afraid of, learning this other language and living in a world. So I took immersion Chinese, moved to Taiwan, and I was teaching English and studying, studying more Chinese, studying martial arts. I ended up getting I met some guy who would have us go to the, this outside Buddhist monastery at 6 a.m, and I'm studying all that. And after about 6 months in Taiwan, I had like more challenges to face. I just went into mainland China by myself.
Did you?
Yeah, just like going to some of these remote areas by myself, hitchhiking. There's no cars in China. This is like early 90s. And I'm just like walking on a road for a half hour and a truck just pulls you over.
Wow.
But I was studying a ton of Eastern philosophies at this time as well, like things like Buddhism and Taoism. And again, for me, it wasn't so much theoretical. It was, how do you live in this world? How do you live? That kind of thing. If it's really true, I can't be afraid to live it out. So after a year, really, and then I decided I'd go down to Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And one thing about Taoism, and here we are in all these weird philosophies, but Taoism kind of sees all of life like a flowing river, and you don't fight it. And you just kind of flow with it, and kind of sees it. And every time you try to like take too much control of your life or things like that, you go up against the rocks on the side or you get caught. So you just kind of flow with life. And so I decided if this is really true, I can't be afraid to live it out. So I arrived in Bangkok airport with no plans whatsoever and just kind of see where I would flow. I went to the bus station and, it's like huge chaos and just trying to figure out where I feel like I should go. And I just felt like I should go on this bus. I had no idea where it's going. I
Okay.
get on it. Like I open up this big map of Thailand to the person next to me and like, could you point like which direction we're going? And I'm like going southern Thailand. I get off and I think, I see a truck coming. I just put my hand up. The truck stops and I get on a truck and I go driving more. And pretty soon I'm like 5 or 6 hours south of Bangkok along the peninsula.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and basically the guy kicks me off because we're not going any farther. So then I'm in this little village in Thailand, and I just kind of, and I actually saw 2 Westerners, like backpacker kind of guys, and they actually went up to me and they go, "Hey, you going to Koh Tao?" I said, "Yes, I am."
I have no idea where that is, but that's where I'm going.
Yeah, so I stay on this little, I sleep at a port, and it was to take a little boat out to a middle of Gulf of Thailand. And so on this little island.
What?
And I go, now it's become like a dive spot, but back then there was like no one on it. So I ended up staying in a little hut on the tiny island in the Gulf of Thailand.
What in the world happened there? I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, well, somebody, I saw about a Buddhist monastery you could stay in, and it would allow Westerners to come in. And so I said, okay, that's where I feel led. So I go to a Buddhist monastery, and I actually went there twice for 2 weeks, and you had to be silent for 2 weeks.
Silent?
Completely. Silent for 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. That for anybody would be hard.
Yeah, I call it Jewish purgatory,
Yes, that's good, Garrett.
And in Buddhism, what I see kind of, I don't know, that everything your desires cause you suffering. So you're to have no desire. That makes sense. And so like, don't want things. And we can think about that logically, right? Things you want cause you trouble. It's interesting. Like if you're Christianity would actually teach the same kind of thing, that your desires wreak havoc on your life. But the Buddhist solution, where the Christian solution is more like, therefore, you need to desire the good things. Sex is a good thing, a desire for that, but it's met in a way which is a blessing. You got to stop meeting it in the wrong way.
Right.
Buddhism would say, just cease desires. If you don't want anything, you'll be at peace. And it's all about kind of transcending life and transcending the suffering. But all that to say is, so I actually gave up all materialism. I gave up backpack. I had like a little 15-pound burlap sack, and I would just go live on an island. I don't care where I was. I don't care where I slept. I don't care about time. I made no plans for the future. I just lived on a little island, in Thailand. I was never going to come home.
Really?
Enjoying Western society. I thought it was totally corrupt. And so I shaved my head. And
you were all in, Garrett. You were all in.
It was the truth,
Yeah. What's amazing to me about what you're saying is that you were all in. You shaved your head. You had a little burlap bag. You were just living what you thought was your best life and the way to go. So, of course, this is all about your testimony and how you came to Jesus. So my brain's like, okay, I know Garrett as a Jewish believer in Jesus. How in the world did you get from that to believing in Jesus? I know we're getting there, but I'm like, okay, I'm eager to hear this. I don't want to rush you, but I want to know.
Sorry for all the background. Yeah,
no, I love the background. It's very helpful.
Yeah. So really, I'm away for 2 years. I'd given up all materialism. I'm off in Thailand. No one can even know where you are. They couldn't find you except you call in occasionally. So no one on earth could get a hold of me.
Right.
And I call in eventually, and my stepmother wants to ask me to come home for my dad's 60th birthday, and that we're going to he wants to go to Israel once in his life. And he's in kind of bad health. And so I came home. I said, fine. I came home, and off we went to Israel.
Okay.
And we went around for 10 days, but I was never going to go back. So I just said goodbye to them. I only took a one-way ticket anyway.
Wow.
And I was just continuing my journey around Israel because I didn't care where I was or what I did. Right. And so then my parents all went home, and I just continued going around. So I was.
So you were staying in Israel. You just decided, I'm going to live in Israel now. The river is taking me to Israel.
Exactly. That's exactly what. And then I just put my hand up for hitchhiking out of Tel Aviv, and I got dropped off in Haifa in front of a Christian youth hostel.
No, of course you did. Yes.
And I got dropped off. I was 27 at this point. I'd never really met anybody who talked anything about Jesus, or maybe I did. And I was dead. I had no memory of it. But
so this is like the first time you heard Jesus that you can recall.
I ever heard it. And he was a Jewish guy at the hostel by the name of Izzy. And ironically, Izzy's one of these guys, if you ever know the personalities, he took way too many drugs before he became a believer in Jesus. It's like, you're total I mean, I love Izzy, but totally fried a little bit, And he was like talking to me mile a minute, blah, 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 Jesus, blah, 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 Jesus. That's all I heard, And he didn't let me speak. Now, I was like this Buddhist guy, so I didn't get it. All I was like going, I have feelings of annoyance. You don't actually, I would never tell him to stop. I had to because it'd be desires to want to break from the conversation. So I just let Izzy speak to me, and Izzy thought that was just great. And Izzy tells people at the hostel, hey, that guy's really open, just because I didn't tell him to be quiet. But, I was not allowed, if that makes sense, to tell him.
I totally understand, right, with your history and your background.
And so they invited me to stay at the hostel then for free.
Okay.
And work a little bit from a room and board. And I go, that's great. I can live there. I can eat.
Yes.
And just continue my kind of contemplative life.
Is your family racing from one activity to the next activity? Are you stressed out because your to-do list never feels completed? Maybe you just need to rest. Shabbat is the Hebrew word for rest or Sabbath. We are commanded to keep the Sabbath holy. But what does that look like? We've created a fun-filled activity box to help you do just that. Besides having games, activities, stickers, and an awesome playlist of music, the Shabbat box will help your family come together to create lifelong memories. The goal of the Shabbat box is to come alongside of your family and generate some exciting and meaningful habits around rest. Curious to know more? Check it out at linkstoMessiah.com or click the link in the show notes.
And then they handed me a Bible, and I thought, the Bible. Once again, this is the river. The river flowed me right into a Bible, and I thought, I never actually read it. I knew the stories from a kid in synagogue, but you don't actually read the Bible. So I started Genesis 1:1, the first page, and I was just going to read through the whole thing. And I got up about to the beginning of Leviticus. And
wow,
I got a little
You made it pretty far.
Yeah. But then I got kind of bogged down. And someone said, why don't you try the New Testament? I'm like, the New Testament? Ooh, that's...
I'm Jewish. I'm not going to read that. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But I thought I can't be afraid of it. And so it was weird, but I read the Gospel of John and Matthew and Luke, all about Jesus, the stories about Jesus. And I thought, Jesus seems like a cool guy. I thought he was like me, this enlightened individual.
Yes.
That was my first experience of Jesus, thinking he was like me, Not me trying to,
I understand.
It was incredible. But I was an atheist in the sense that there's actually God out there who cares about us and who's interested in our life. I thought that's nice for folks who need that kind of stuff.
Right.
I didn't mind it. I mean, life's hard. If that helps you to think that God's real, then hey, good.
Good for you.
I had no problem with it. But I had a couple, I didn't believe it at all, but I had a couple weird things happen to me. I was at that hostel for, 2 months. And a couple times people would try to talk to me about Jesus and I wouldn't listen to anything they'd say. But I got a weird, buzzy feeling, almost like chills kind of thing. And I didn't tell anybody, but I was like, that was weird. And I was really into spiritual experiences. And then there were a couple times, I opened the Bible up. I remember one time wondering how you pray. I hear these people praying. I go, that seems kind of interesting. Maybe I'll try that. And I go over and I kind of close my eyes and I think I'll try this thing. And I go, this is just stupid. It's like you're talking in your head, I opened the Bible up and it had a little heading and said, how to pray right at that moment. And I was like, whoa, magic book or something.
Yes.
And so these weird things happen. Then it really all kind of came down for me in one night. I've been there a couple months and I was set to leave the hostel. And I mean, it's a bigger story, but that little buzzy feels like 1,000 times over. And I felt like something. And I actually shook it. I mean, this is going to sound hard to believe, but it's really what happened. I shook for 3 hours. And I felt like something.
Like physically, your body was shaking?
Yeah, physically shaking. And I was almost yelling at, there was one other guy in the room not knowing what's going on. It's 9 to 12. I was going to leave the hostel that day. And all these people at the hostel were actually praying and all this kind of stuff. And I just felt like something was real there. And I think I said what was my first prayer, which was, let me just see this through. I don't want to be afraid. Whatever's happening right now, I just want to see whatever's through. And then I felt this strange compulsion to fall on the ground. So then I'm on my knees, my face is on the ground. It was almost like a yoga pose almost, but it was hunched over. I mean, I was into all that stuff,
Right.
And I was hunched over, and then I felt like these words come inside my head. It said, "The Lord Jesus Christ is my Savior." I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't know what it was. It was like strange language.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'll never say something like that. What is that? But then I thought, I can't be afraid of it. Whatever's happened to me, I feel like I have to say it. So I just said it again and again. And I was like, it's past midnight. I'm on the floor covered with sweat. And it's like, they went and woke up the other people at the hostel who were there, this little youth hostel. And they all came in and they were like going, "Whoa, hallelujah." And I'm like going, "Get away from me. I don't know what's going on here." But it was real, And I stayed in that hostel, and even like right after, they're thinking, "Are you, so you believe in Jesus now?" I'm like, "I don't know." They're like,
I think I do. Right.
Yeah, you believe Jesus rose, died for your sins and rose from the dead? I'm like, I have no idea what that means.
That's interesting. So you didn't understand that component of the gospel.
Nothing.
Wow. But you knew you were saying Jesus is Lord.
I knew God was real. It's got something to do with Jesus. That was the extent of what I got.
Okay. Wow.
And there was this reality happening. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I had like infections on my body and, got really sick, all this kind of stuff. And suddenly it was like real. I opened the Bible up and it was like God talking to me, and the thing was like alive. And so for me, it was all on the kind of the back end. And I was like almost heard like voices in my head. One was God, someone was like screaming, "This is a lie! Get out of here!" All this kind of stuff. And it was just real craziness. But I stayed at hostel for a whole year.
You did. Okay, so let me just ask a clarifying question. You said you had like wounds on your body, injuries on your body, but then you were healed, or I missed something there?
Well, no, I mean, after it happened, I started getting like these infections on my body and stuff.
Okay.
And and even got sick and all,
Oh, okay.
Kind of crazy. There was something really.
What do you think that was?
I think it was demonic, but
that's where I thought you were going. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make a huge, I don't like to, and I think sometimes, I think you get into more trouble when you're saying, "Here's what happened to me." Sometimes the absolute truth is what happened. And you could build your own interpretation as to what that was. But yeah, that's what I think it was. I mean, I was like screaming and all kinds of stuff.
Wow. Okay.
It's interesting. It didn't really end. I had a lot of yelling in my head and all that kind of stuff. And it really ended pretty precipitously when I got baptized. I got baptized in the Mediterranean, went into and it was like almost like a fever pitch of screaming prior to that. And I gave my testimony and confessed Jesus the Lord before all the folks and went in the water, and it just stopped like that. It was incredible.
Oh, wow. Garrett, so many things. I've had so many goosebump moments in your story. Wow. Just like that, those voices were gone in your head.
Yeah. Now, they weren't gone forever, but they were gone for then. The time they came back is something that we kind of shared together was on the streets of New York in a campaign.
Yes. Oh, that's when the voices came back.
In a different form, but I
understand. Yes. Wow, Garrett. Amazing. Boy, there's so much more to unpack. Obviously, we're doing like, the Cliff's Notes version of your story. Can you share with us? So this conversion experience happened. You got baptized. Obviously, your life was completely changed. The river was flowing in a very different manner. So, it's hard to say, from then to now, can you sum up your life? That's impossible, right? That's impossible because that was a long time ago. But can you just give us an overview of how you got from getting saved in Israel to now you're a pastor in Massachusetts? What in the world?
Yeah, when people talk about somebody's talking about your calling and stuff like that, to be
yes, right.
It actually, I when I woke up, pretty much within days of that happened, I felt like I was going to spend the rest of my life telling people about it. And
you did.
And I remember they had a little outreach or something at the hostel, and you get a little group of 20 people, and you stand up and you give food or whatever. Right. And I spoke 2 months after, and I had never felt so I just felt like something had grabbed me and was speaking through me. And it
empowered.
It was incredible. I just felt like level of, articulate and idea and power. So it was and I thought what just happened? I thought, what was that? And it was incredible. And I just thought wow, so much beyond what I had planned or thought about. And it came out so incredible. And so I kind of, and I was at the hostel, and that was for a whole year. So I was like sort of like this instant, telling people about the Lord, instant, sort of missionary, if you want to call it. And I came home after a year because my dad actually they were kind of freaked out that I become such a believer. And he was, and my stepmom they went to a church to figure out what I was so crazy about.
Did they? They were like, what is going on with Garrett? What happened? He came to Israel and he's never been the same since.
So it was crazy. And my mom and my dad was really taken. They were, pastor was like talking about the, preaching from the Gospels. And he's like, hey, they're talking about Jewish stuff all the time. That's all right.
Your dad said this about after going to church. Wow.
And so we began talking every Sunday, me from Israel, him in, near San Francisco, after discussing his sermons and that kind of stuff. And I came home and a month after that, he became a believer in Jesus after I came home.
I didn't know that. Another goosebump moment.
And I, Jews for Jesus spoke at our church or something. And the guy asked me if I was interested in, doing a, campaign, that kind of stuff. And I ended up, becoming a missionary with Jews for Jesus for about 12 years.
Wow, Garrett.
Ended up in a church preaching. I'm a total mistaken, the accidental pastor. I never sought to be a pastor. I just kind of ended up in a church, ended up doing it. And now I'm like the preacher.
Right.
So.
You are the preacher. And I think I'm just amazed by your story. It's so funny how I've known you for all these years and I've never known the details of your salvation story. So hearing that you were in Israel and in this hostel and had this life-changing experience, but I specifically liked the portion that you shared about that you just started, God just allowed you to start preaching, really. Right? He was putting the words in your mouth that were coming out. And here you are, I don't know how many years later, you're doing this exact same thing in a different format, but it's the same thing.
It's actually fairly amazing. And you still you sit there on before like Sunday morning, I still just going, oh, Lord, do that thing, Yeah. And I have all these ideas of things to say, but Lord, take it over. And it's funny. It's still kind of the same experience as it was.
Right.
25 or 30 years ago.
It just takes you back to the basics. That's why I'm always so encouraged to hear someone's story of how God reached down and grabbed their heart, because every story is so different and God uses so many different people and different events in our lives to bring us to Him. But the crux of it is this, I don't want to say simple message because it's complex, of course, but it's, who do you believe Jesus to be? What do you believe about Him? And that's the bottom line. I actually listened to one of your sermons that you just released on your church's website from Psalm 8, 9. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but you were talking about how God's glory is over the whole earth. And you said something that it's not localized. And I loved that so much because, well, I don't need to explain it. You explained it, right? That it's not localized. It's for the whole world, for the whole earth. His glory is everywhere. So it doesn't matter where we are. God will reach our hearts.
Amen.
Oh, Garrett, thank you. Wow.
Well, thanks
I'm
for having
so grateful.
me. Blessing. It's great to see you, and how fun. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to share a story.
I think it's really wonderful. I just, we always have tech issues when we're sharing our testimony. There's a lot to be said about that. Well, I thank you so much, Garrett. This has been wonderful to hear your story. I know people are going to love to hear it. And is there anything that we didn't say that you want to say?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Garrett. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for being a part of the Links to Messiah podcast family. Your support means the world to us, and your feedback and engagement keep us going strong. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's continue growing this incredible community together. Until next week, keep reading the Bible to your children, keep their curiosity burning, and keep coming back for more tips to anchor your child's faith to Jesus, our Messiah. This is your host, Rachel Links Kushner, signing off with a big smile and a heart full of gratitude.